The scent of expensive incense and stale tradition didn't mask the smell of betrayal. I stood in the dressing room, my hands shaking so violently I nearly tore the delicate lace of the wedding gown. A gown that wasn't meant for me. My sister, Akari, had always been the brave one. Brave enough to flirt with danger, and apparently, brave enough to bolt through a bathroom window 2 hours before she was set to marry the most terrifying woman in the city. Hana, my father had whispered, his face the color of wet parchment. If someone doesn't walk down that aisle, we aren't just bankrupt. We're buried. So here I was. The substitute. The sacrificial lamb in silk. The ceremony was a blur of bowing heads and heavy silence. I didn't dare look up until we were prompted to seal the contract. That's when I saw her. Rin Ryazaki. She didn't look like a mobster, she looked like a fallen goddess. Her traditional black kimono was draped with a lethal sort of elegance, and as she moved to sign the registry, the silk slipped just enough to reveal the tail of a dragon tattoo coiling up her throat, disappearing into her hairline. She was breathtaking. And she was looking at me like I was a cockroach that had ruined her favorite pair of shoes. The fury in her eyes wasn't loud. It was a cold, deep-sea pressure that made it hard to breathe. He knew. She knew the moment she saw me that I wasn't the fiery, outspoken Akari. I was just the quiet, dutiful shadow. The first 3 months of marriage were a masterclass in loneliness. Ren's estate was a sprawling fortress of minimalist wood and glass, hidden behind stone walls that felt more like a prison than a home. We lived like ghosts passing in a hallway. She left before dawn to run the family business, which I assumed involved a lot of scowling and making people disappear, and returned long after I'd retreated to my room. On the rare occasions we ate together, the only sound was the clink of chopsticks. I tried, God knows I tried. The garden looks lovely this morning, Rinsen, I'd say, my voice cracking in the vast dining hall. She wouldn't even look up from her tablet. If you want more flowers, tell the steward. Don't bore me with the details. Her voice was like velvet dipped in ice. I just nodded, staring at my rice, reminding myself, this is a name only. You are a placeholder. Don't look at her ink. Don't wonder what her skin feels like. But then I'd see her in the hallway at night, her kimono loosened, sweat glistening on the intricate tattoos covering her shoulders after a session in the dojo, and my heart would traitorously skip a beat. She was a masterpiece of violence and beauty, and I was just the girl who'd been forced upon her. Everything changed when Chloe stepped off the plane. Chloe was my best friend from childhood, all bright laughs and smelling like expensive French perfume. She didn't care about Yakuza protocols or the fact that my wife could have her tongue removed for breathing too loudly. Hana, you've turned into a little doll in this mausoleum, Chloe shouted, dragging me out to a crowded cafe in Shibuya. For the first time in months I laughed. I actually felt alive. We spent every afternoon together. I'd text her under the table during those silent dinners with Run, my face lighting up as Chloe sent me ridiculous memes of French bulldogs. One evening I walked into the foyer, still giggling at a voice note Chloe had sent. Rin was standing at the top of the stairs, a silhouette of pure, radiating menace. My smile died instantly. My spine stiffened and I bowed so low my forehead nearly hit the floor. Welcome home, Rin-san. I didn't hear you come in. Rin didn't say a word. She just watched me, her dark eyes tracking the way my hands trembled as I tucked my phone away. The disappointment in her gaze had shifted. It was now something sharper. Something that felt like a predator realizing its prey was looking at a different hunter. The breaking point didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened in Ren's study. I heard a crash, the sound of a heavy glass carafe shattering against a wall. I rushed in thinking there was an assassin. Instead, I found Rin staring at a tablet held by her assistant, Kenji, who looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. On the screen was a grainy photo from the previous night. Chloe and I were at a crowded street festival. A surge in the crowd had pushed us together, and for a split second, our faces had collided in what looked exactly like a deep, lingering kiss. Rinsen, I can explain. She was across the room before I could blink. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything else. She simply walked toward me until I was backed against the cold mahogany of her desk. I thought you were a mouse, Hana, she hissed, her face inches from mine. The scent of sandalwood and danger rolled off her. I thought you were too terrified to even speak. And yet here you are, giving away what belongs to the Ryazaki family in the middle of a public street. It was an accident. The crowded, quiet, She grabbed my chin, her thumb pressing into my skin with bruising force. Her eyes were no longer cold. They were a bonfire of possessive rage. If you wanted to be kissed so badly, you should have asked your wife. Before I could breathe, her mouth slammed into mine. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was an invasion. It tasted like expensive whiskey and absolute authority. I tried to push her away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to tell her the truth to stop this madness, but she misinterpreted my struggle. She growled into my mouth, a low, animalistic sound, and pinned my wrists above my head. Suddenly the fear changed. It twisted into something hot and heavy in my gut. As her hand slid down to grip my waist, pulling me flush against the hard lines of her body, my resistance crumbled. I didn't just stop fighting. I started pulling her closer. The room felt like it was losing oxygen. My back was pressed so hard against the mahogany desk that I could feel the grain of the wood through my silk blouse. Ren's kiss was a storm, punishing, possessive, and entirely devoid of the name-only politeness we had maintained for months. I tried to gasp out an explanation, my lips fluttering against hers to say, "Chloe is just a friend." But Ren took that opening to deepen the kiss, her tongue claiming me with a terrifying hunger. My hands, which had been feebly pushing at her shoulders, betrayed me. My fingers curled into the expensive fabric of her blazer, pulling her closer until there wasn't a molecular gap left between us. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. Her breathing was ragged, her pupils so blown out that her eyes looked like bottomless ink wells. "Do not," she rasped, her voice vibrating through my chest, "ever let another person touch what is mine again. Do you understand, Hana?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my face flushed a deep, shameful crimson. She looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me before turning on her heel and walking out, leaving me trembling and leaning against the desk for support. My heart wasn't just racing. It was changing its rhythm entirely. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted from a morgue to a pressure cooker. I stayed in my room, too embarrassed to face her, until a knock came at the door. It was Kenji, Ren's assistant. He looked uncharacteristically nervous, clutching a stack of printed papers. "The boss requested I give you these," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. I took them, expecting legal separation papers or a list of new, stricter rules. Instead, the top page read, 5 Ways to Make Your Woman Swoon. A Billionaire's Guide to Dominance. I blinked. "Kenji, what is this?" "The boss has been researching," Kenji sighed, looking like he wanted to jump off the nearest balcony. "She spent 4 hours on a forum called See Romance Web Novels Daily. He's taking it very seriously, Hana-sama. Please, just go along with it." 10 minutes later, Rin entered. She wasn't wearing her usual sharp suit. She was wearing a black silk shirt unbuttoned halfway down her chest, exposing the vibrant reds and greens of her tattoos. She leaned against the doorframe in a pose so choreographed it belonged on a book cover. "Pack your things," she commanded, her voice dropping an octave into a forced, gravelly baritone. "We're going to spend. I shall provide for you in a way that Frenchman never could. Chloe is a girl, Rin, and she's—" "I said pack," she interrupted, pointing a finger at me. "And don't talk back to your wife." The shopping trip was an exercise in beautiful absurdity. We didn't go to a normal mall. Rin had an entire luxury boutique cleared out. A dozen staff members stood in a line, bowing so low they were practically folding in half. Rin sat in a velvet armchair, crossing her long legs. She didn't look at the racks. She just gestured vaguely at the most expensive section. "Bring her everything that is sheer. Everything that shows she belongs to the Ryazaki family." I was ushered into the changing room with an armful of silk, lace, and leather. My face was a permanent shade of magenta. I stepped out in a deep emerald slip dress that was more slit than fabric, the silk clinging to every curve. Rin stopped breathing. The CEO persona she was trying to maintain cracked instantly. She stood up, her gaze wandering over my exposed shoulders and the line of my throat. "Is this okay?" I whispered, feeling incredibly vulnerable. She didn't answer with words. She walked over, her heavy boots clicking on the marble, and grabbed the curtain of the changing room, yanking it shut behind us. The space was tiny, cramped, and smelled of her expensive wood smoke perfume. "Hana," she breathed, her hand sliding up the silk of my thigh, her calloused palm sending jolts of electricity through my skin. You have no idea how much I've wanted to tear this off you since the wedding night. Rin, we're in a public. I bought the store, she growled, her mouth finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. Everything in here, including you, is paid for. She dominated me right there against the three-way mirror, a blur of lace and ink and frantic breaths. For the first time, I didn't feel like a substitute. I felt like the only woman in the world. We left the mall with 2 black SUVs just to carry the bags. But Rin wasn't done. You need a car, she stated as we drove toward the dealership district. I have a bike, Rin. Or I can take the train. It's really not. Ariazuki does not take the train, she snapped, though her hand was firmly entwined with mine in the back seat, her thumb stroking my knuckles. You need something that says, stay away. At the dealership, I pointed to a sensible silver economy hatchback. That one. It's small, easy to park. Rin didn't even look at it. She walked straight to a matte black Lamborghini Urus and a custom armored Rolls Royce. We'll take both, she told the dealer, who looked like he'd just won the lottery. And paint them the color of her eyes. If I see her in a small cheap car, I'll fire everyone in this building. She turned to me, a smug, dark smirk on her face. Now shall we go home? I believe your childhood friend is waiting at the gates to say goodbye. I'd like her to see exactly whose car you're getting into. The war for my heart was over, but the drama? The drama was just getting started. Because as we pulled up to the estate, I saw not just Chloe standing there, but a very familiar, very tearful figure. My sister, Akari, had come home. And she looked like she wanted her wedding back. The air in the driveway was thick enough to choke on. Rin didn't even wait for the driver to open her door. She stepped out of the SUV with the predatory grace of a panther, her hand immediately finding the small of my back, pulling me firmly against her side. It was a silent, lethal claim of ownership. Standing by the gate was Chloe, looking defiant but pale, and beside her, wrapped in a tattered trench coat and looking like a drowned rat, was Akari, my sister. The girl who had left me to the wolves and was now staring at Rin with wide, shimmering eyes. Rin-san. Akari sobbed, taking a step forward. I made a mistake. The life I ran for. It was a lie. I should have been the one by your side. I'm back now. We can fix this. I felt Ren's grip tighten on my waist until it was almost painful. I expected her to be relieved. I expected her to throw me aside for the woman she was actually supposed to marry. Instead, Rin let out a cold, dry laugh that sent shivers down my spine. Fix what, Akari? Ren's voice was like a blade being drawn from a scabbard. You didn't just run from a wedding. You ran from a debt. And Hana? Hana paid it in full. Rin turned her gaze to Chloe, who was stepping forward to defend me. And you? Paris is lovely this time of year. I suggest you find a flight back before your friendship with my wife becomes a liability to your health. Back inside the house, the atmosphere had shifted again. Rin was pacing the living room, her eyes darting between me and a new set of printouts Kenji had brought. Rin, about Akari. She's my sister. We can't just leave her at the gate, I said, though my heart was still thumping from the way she'd called me her wife. Rin stopped pacing. She looked at me, then looked at a paper titled, Chapter 42, The CEO's Cold Shoulder, How to Make Her Beg. She cleared her throat, adjusted her lapels, and looked at me with an expression of forced, icy indifference. A queen does not concern herself with the peasants at the gate. You are the only one permitted in my palace. Now, come here and tell me I am the only sun in your sky. I stared at her. Did the internet tell you to say that? Ren's face flushed a magnificent shade of pink, clashing horribly with her tattoos. It is a proven psychological tactic for high-net-worth romantic engagement. Don't question the process, Hana. Rin, I laughed, walking over and taking her hands. The scary Yakuza boss was being defeated by a 99-cent web novel. You don't need the scripts. You already bought me a fleet of cars and a wardrobe that costs more than my college tuition. I think I get the point. Her gaze softened, the seal mask slipping. She pulled me into her lap on the sofa, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. The cars were just noise. I realized when I saw that photo of you in the Parisienne that I had been a fool. I thought I was punishing you by being cold. I was only punishing myself. I bought something else, Rin whispered, her voice losing its forced baritone and returning to that husky, dangerous velvet. Something the shopgirl said was essential for a marriage like ours. She reached for a small black shopping bag, one she hadn't let the bodyguards carry. Inside was a piece of lingerie that looked like it was made of spiderwebs and moonlight. It was sheer, dangerous, and utterly scandalous. "Put it on," she commanded. This time it wasn't a web novel trope. It was a direct order. I took the silk into the bedroom, my heart doing gymnastics. When I stepped out, the cool air of the room hit my skin, making me feel exposed in a way I'd never been. Rin was sitting on the edge of the bed, her blazer discarded, her shirt open. The sight of her, the ink, the muscle, the sheer power radiating from her, made my knees weak. She didn't say a word. She just watched me, her eyes traveling over every inch of me until I felt like I was glowing. "Hana," she said, her voice a low growl. "Your sister wants this life. She wants the gold, the name, the power. But she would never survive a single night with me." She stood up, closing the distance between us in 2 steps. She trapped me against the bedpost, her hands ghosting over the sheer fabric of the lingerie. "Because I don't want a bride who runs," she whispered, her lips brushing mine. "I want the one who stayed. The one who looks at me with fear, and then asks for more." Hours later, as I lay tangled in the silk sheets, the adrenaline finally fading into a warm, heavy bliss, a faint sound came from the balcony. I sat up, pulling a robe over my shoulders. Rin was still asleep, her face finally peaceful, her tattooed arm draped over the spot where I'd been lying. I crept to the window and pushed it open. Down in the garden, illuminated by the security lights, were 2 figures. Akari and Chloe. They weren't fighting. They were talking. "She doesn't belong with a monster like that," I heard Chloe hiss. "We have to get her out." "I don't care about getting her out," Akari snapped back. "I want my life back. If Rin won't take me, I'll make sure she realizes Hana isn't the perfect wife she thinks she is. I know Hana's secrets, Chloe. I know what will make Rin discard her like trash." I froze. My hand went to the glass, my breath hitching. I had spent my whole life being the good sister, the quiet one. But as I looked back at Rin, my terrifying, beautiful, cringy, obsessive wife, I realized I wasn't that girl anymore. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they forgot one thing: I was a Ryazaki now. And we don't play fair. The garden lights cast long, distorted shadows as I watched my sister and my best friend conspire in the dark. A few hours ago, I would have trembled at the thought of Akari's secrets. The small rebellions of my youth, the private diaries, the letters I'd written about how much I hated the Yakuza. But as the cold night air hit my skin, I felt a strange, new heat rising. I looked back at Rin, sleeping like a dark goddess amidst the wreckage of our passion. She had looked at my scars, my fears, and my stuttering heart, and she had claimed them all. I didn't sneak away. I didn't hide. I stepped out onto the balcony, the silk of my robe billowing like a battle flag. "It's late for a garden party, isn't it?" Down below they both jumped. Chloe looked guilty, Akari looked venomous. "Hana, listen to me," Chloe pleaded, her voice a frantic whisper. "She's dangerous. You're only acting like this because you're scared. You have a plan. We can get you to Paris." "I don't want to go to Paris, Chloe," I said, my voice steady, ringing out over the manicured hedges. "And Akari? Whatever you think you have on me, tell her. Go ahead. Wake her up. But remember, Rin doesn't care about who I was. She only cares about who I am when I'm screaming her name." Akari's face contorted. "You riddle thief. You're enjoying this, aren't you? The cars, the clothes. You stole my life." "You threw it away," I countered. "And I'm keeping what I found." I didn't tell Rin about the midnight meeting. I didn't have to. When we walked down to breakfast the next morning, Kenji was waiting with a grim expression and a tablet. "Boss," he said, glancing at me. "Your sister-in-law has leaked a series of personal correspondences to the tabloid press. They're claiming the marriage is a sham, that you're holding Hanasama hostage, and that Hanasama actually hates the Ryazaki family." Ren's expression didn't change, but the coffee cup in her hand cracked. A thin line of ceramic splattered onto the table. She didn't look at the tablet. She looked at me. "Is that true, Hana? Do you hate us?" I walked over to her, ignoring the CEO advice she usually relied on. I sat directly on her lap, wrapping my arms around her neck in front of Kenji and the entire household staff. I kissed the dragon tattoo on her throat. "I hate the silence," I whispered. "But I love the woman who broke it." Ren's eyes flared with a dark, triumphant light. She turned to Kenji. Burn the tabloids. Buy the publishing house. And find Akari. I want her to see exactly how unhappy this marriage is. That afternoon, the estate gates opened for a final confrontation. Rin had summoned them both, Akari and Chloe. We stood on the grand staircase, a tableau of power. Rin was in a tailored suit, her hand firmly entwined with mine, her thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. You wanted to speak of secrets? Rin said, her voice echoing in the hall. You wanted to tell me that Hana feared me? I already knew. You wanted to tell me she hated this life? I knew that too. She stepped down one stair, pulling me with her. But here is the secret you didn't know, Akari. I never wanted the brave sister. I wanted the one who was strong enough to stay when everyone else ran. You are a ghost in this house. Chloe, you are a memory. But Hana? Hana is the heart of the Ryazaki Empire. Rin looked at Kenji. See them out. If they set foot within 5 miles of my wife again, don't bother asking for permission. Just handle it. As they were led away, Akari screaming about unfairness and Chloe looking utterly defeated, Rin turned me to face her. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of a grave anymore. It was the silence of a sanctuary. Rin reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I recognized the font immediately. What does the internet say now? I teased, leaning into her chest. Rin looked at the paper, then tossed it into the fireplace. We watched as rule number 101, how to keep your submissive wife loyal, turned into ash. The internet is full of idiots, Rin muttered, pulling me into a kiss that tasted like forever. I think I'll write my own story from now on. And the cars? I asked, grinning. Do I still have to drive the gold-plated SUV? Rin smirked, that beautiful, terrifying, obsessive smirk. Actually, I bought you a helicopter this morning. The CEO forum said it was the only way to truly show my devotion. I laughed, the sound echoing through the halls of the Yakuza fortress. My sister had wanted the crown, but she'd missed the point. Being a Ryazaki wasn't about the money or the fear. It was about finding the one person worth burning the whole world down for. And as Rin picked me up and headed toward our room, I knew the drama was far from over. But for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be.